All right, friends. Welcome to an impromptu and differently localized version of the CEL program for this month. Thank you, everybody, for being safe, wearing your masks. Part of the reasons that we needed to relocate was for COVID reasons. So making sure that everybody stays safe is really important to us, as well as making sure that we stay safe. I hope that you enjoyed your month of leisurely I would encourage you all to continue to talk to each of the people that are tying and being tied throughout the course of the experiments that we're going to run today. But before we do all of that stuff, I have found in my rope journey that it is very important for me, as somebody who is tying, to spend a little bit of time warming up my body and making sure that I'm ready to do rope.
And especially on a day like today, where it's kind of cold out, and some people's joints get a little stiff because of the moisture in the air, it's especially important to do that thing.
One of the things I've encountered in hosting and interacting with a bunch of people who do rope professionally is that a lot of them have recurring physical ailments coming from doing rope on a professional basis. Bad backs, bad hands, bad knees, things along those lines. The ideas around making sure that our bodies are ready to do this thing have only really become popular in and around rope bondage in the last decade or less. So it's really beneficial that we have so many folks who have come to the rope world from other places that know about how bodies move and work and what's important in order to keep them healthy. So for my warm-up, I will share with you, as with a lot of things, you don't need to do the thing that I do. I'm just giving you a template for an idea of what you might do. I've stolen the bulk of my warm-up from a rope artist named Hedwig, who's based out of, was it?
Yeah. They're based in Sweden.
Yeah, they're based in Sweden, and they're the founder of Hitch and Bitches. So we will start by standing.
And just a quick note before we start, any of the stuff that we do, if you feel a sharp, acute pain, please stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like your body has limitations and we want you to respect that. We're gonna show it, but if that range of motion doesn't match your current range of motion, totally fine.
That's
Back
totally
out,
cool.
do what you can, right? This is an example. We want people to be embodied and warm for the exercises we're going to do. And in general, when you do rope, we encourage you to do something to warm yourselves up. So this is just an example. Do what feels good for you.
The reason that I like this particular one is that you start at the bottom of your body and you work all the way up to the top of your body. So it starts off with small ankle circles.
And we're going to do like 5 each way
So
on
you
each side.
press your toe into the ground and roll your ankle around, 5 in one direction, 5 in the opposite direction. And then you switch sides. And once we've done those, we move up to knee circles. So put your knees together, and you're going to circle them around in one direction.
And if it's better for your balance, you can put your hands on your knees or at your hips.
And then once you've done 5 in one direction, 5 in the other direction. And then for my, the place where my legs connect to my hips, I open out and place back.
So it's almost like you're stepping over something, right?
So you want to lift your knees straight up
Up and over.
as high as you can, and then over and down. Getting as big and wide of a range of motion as possible.
Yeah.
I feel my hips pop every time I do it.
And for those of you near a wall, if you need some support, you can brace yourself on the wall. It can also be helpful to do this with like a chair nearby for balance.
And then everyone's favorite one, hands on your hips. And swing your hips around.
In and out of barrel.
And in the opposite direction.
And I encourage you to take a lot of deep breaths as you're
Yep.
doing these motions, right? If you breathe more, it will encourage the blood flow out and around and through your body to help you warm up.
Once I'm done with that, I typically do a round of
You can
cat-cow.
stay standing, we're gonna sit so we're on camera, but,
It's gonna be hard for the knees.
oh, sorry, I didn't know what you were doing next.
Yeah. So, again, drop your belly, raise your neck and shoulders, get a nice arch in one direction.
Tuck
Push
your
back,
head in.
round your back, get a nice arch in the other direction.
I tend to inhale when my head is up and exhale as I arch my back and tuck my head into my chest.
And then shoulder warm-ups. Shoulders are fun to warm up because they are ball joints, so they move in a whole bunch of directions. I have a preference for a shoulder exercise called washing the face and flipping the ponytail. So you want to have your hands to your side.
This one comes from our friend Kuoko. She has a new book out, for those of you who are interested. It's called Put Me in a Box.
You want to bring your hand up across your face as though you're washing your face. Move it directly behind your head, and then flip your ponytail.
So
Wash your face,
what you're looking for is your elbow
flip your
motion.
ponytail.
Should come straight up,
Wash
And
your
then-
face,
straight out.
flip your ponytail. Wash your face, flip your ponytail. Other side, same thing.
And you should really feel this start to warm up your shoulders as you're doing it. If it's not starting to get warm, you may not be going to the full range of your motion.
Mm-hmm.
So try going a little further. if
Yeah.
you can. But again, to your level of comfort.
Another option for this, if you want something a little bit more involved, is Melissa will do a thing called teacups.
Right, so this is also something I learned, or that was popularized by Fuoco and is available in a book that is also, we can talk about later, but that is available for purchase. So you're gonna start with your hands in front. You're gonna draw your palms in toward your chest. You're gonna duck them down kind of behind you and out to the sides. And then bring them up and around and over your head, continuing the circle out and around back in front of you again. It's kind of complicated. Now we're going to reverse it. So we're gonna go out to the sides, up and around your head. You're gonna dive back down, come underneath your armpits, and out to the front again.
This is too smart for me. That's why I have to do it. Wash my face, flip my ponytail.
It's a lot of movements, but I find that it does a great job of warming up everything in my shoulders. Also, one thing to keep in mind is that you want to keep your core nice and tight as you're doing it. So it's a lot to keep in mind, but it does a great job of warming everything up. It's hard when you have people next to you. Because you really want to get all the way out, all the way up and over and around, and then back to the front. And then pulling in again. And we'll only do 3 of these because they take a while. Up and around over your head, out to the sides, and to the... Awesome.
And then do you want to explain to them your wrist
Sure,
exercises
I
that you do?
can. So I will put my hands straight out in front, making fists. And I'm gonna imagine that I have like a rope or a rod between my hands. And then I'm going to bend it forward, right? So this is really for your wrists. So we're gonna do 5 this way. Just kind of like you're nodding, yes and no, right? Yes. And then back centered and flex outward, like you're trying to bend that rod. And this is gonna allow you to get some more mobility in your wrist joints. Because you have a ton of tiny little bones in there and a lot of connective tissues, and it's important that that all gets warmed up so you're using them as you tie.
Cool. And then the last thing I tend to do is either some sort of neck stretch or neck roll.
Oh, are we not doing flicks?
Oh gosh, we can do flicks if you really want a good warm up.
I mean, that's the main one from head.
So to warm your fingers up, your fingers in your wrist. This is going to be tough. We'll only do it once. You're going to hold your hands in front of you. You're going to flick as hard as you can 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front again. Grip as hard as you can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So as you do that, like if you did maybe 3 cycles all the way through, you'll start to feel your forearms really get warm,
And
as
then your
well
shoulders.
as your fingers and your shoulders, obviously from like rotating around that, like the cycle through of the different arm positions. But it like that's kind of a full arm warm up, which is nice.
And then the last thing I'll tend to do is some sort of neck roll. And I'm really gentle with these.
Yeah, if you experience pain in any direction, like back out and just be more gentle that way. If you know that your neck is very tight, you can skip going back. You can just do front, side to side rolls. Also totally fine. Essentially what you're looking out for, if you're like, is that pain okay? If you feel like a stretching, that's good. If you feel a sharp pain, back out.
That's bad.
Sharp pain, bad. Stretching, discomfort can be okay.
In the case of all of these things for a warm-up, I'm not doing a static stretch. In all of these, we're doing like a mobile warm-up.
A dynamic movement.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say, I'm going to stretch before I do the thing. Stretching, for the most part, implies you go into a position and stay there. That's great afterward, right? Once you're warm, once you're already set, and especially after you come out of rope or have finished doing rope, stretching at that point is great because it can increase flexibility. However, stretching beforehand, like before you're warm, can lead to more injury. So I encourage a dynamic active warm-up and then a static stretching afterward. That is sort of the general wisdom within fitness circles these days. So that is what I would encourage.
So now that everybody's warmed up, what is the topic of today's class? So, Wicked Dave, in a class, the first class I ever took with Wicked Dave, made a statement that I've thought about for nearly 8 years since I took that class.
And for those of you who don't know, Wicked Dave is a Rovartis base in the UK. Just quick explainer.
He said, learning to do rope bondage by learning to tie patterns is like learning to drive a car by learning to read a map. The thing we do when we're doing rope bondage is a process-based exercise. It is as much how we are doing what we are doing as what we are doing. The patterns, their stability and their beauty, while all of that stuff is something to strive for, if we are not interacting with the person that we are tying, and that interaction isn't the basis for both of our joy, it doesn't really matter how pretty those things are, right? So this class is meant to start to get you thinking about not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it with the person you're doing it with, and how they react to you doing that thing, and observing those reactions. In order to do that, we're going to go through a series of experiments. These experiments can be repeated by you whenever you like them. They're really helpful for me when I meet somebody that I haven't tied before, someone new.
And surprise, they're going to be your homework. So
Yeah.
you're going to do these a lot.
Yeah, so for the bulk of today's class, you're going to need one rope.
Singular rope. We will only be using one rope today.
You're going to need to know how to tie a single column tie. Hey, look, you already know how to do that. And you're going to need to observe, in most instances, a demonstration between Melissa and I, contextualize the observation of what we're doing, and then have a conversation with your partner about what you would like to do and what is okay and not okay about it, right? So the first exercise we're going to do, oftentimes when you're talking about safety, about rope bondage, folks will say something along the lines of, whatever you do, don't put rope around someone's neck. The first exercise we're going to do is going to put rope around someone's neck. There's a reason for this. There is an internal and specific reaction that nearly everyone has about having something around their neck that is primal and somewhat undeniable and very observable, right? And so what we're doing to sort of get you used to and familiar with observing the person that you're tying, we're trying to go for fairly big reactions in a safe space. And this is a place that will provide that big reaction, right? So we're going to start off the exercise. And I'm just going to go one wrap around Melissa's neck. I don't need to go anymore. And I'm not tying tight.
You can probably see there's a lot of space here.
I'm just tying big enough where it won't slip over Melissa's neck. I'm doing my book knot, making sure that's nice and tight, right? And then I'm moving away, and I'm holding the tension between the two of us, right? This tension, in a lot of ways, is like a tin can telephone. The tighter I have, the smaller the movements I can use that Melissa's going to feel. The looser it is, the harder that communication is to have happen, right?
I don't know what's happening. Right?
Tension is important.
Like, when it's here, I kind of feel like, maybe he's not paying attention. Maybe he doesn't care what I do. Hard to say.
But when I tighten, Melissa's going to feel that, right? Regardless of what happens, Melissa's going to feel that single column around her neck. And that's going to be a thing that she can start to think about. And then little movements that I take with my hand, as I draw Melissa forward, I can feel in this rope whether or not she's acquiescing to me pulling her forward or whether or not she's pulling back. And that gives me information, right? And I can make a decision about that information. I can turn Melissa's head one way. I can move the knot, turn it the other way. I can draw Melissa down. And one thing about having rope around your neck is you're gonna go where that rope is directing you. I can bring Melissa up, right? In a lot of ways, this is similar to having someone on a leash. I can change my level and draw Melissa's gaze to where my level is. I can use other portions of my body to pin Melissa down. But there's a whole lot of power and a whole lot of control that I can execute just by keeping this tension tight and just by utilizing small movements with my hand.
And notice he's not like jerking it around, and he's not even needing to use his whole hand there. Like, it's a really delicate touch that you can use and can see a lot of different
just
things.
this tug, you can see, all I'm doing is shifting my fingers back, and you can see Melissa move forward, right? It takes a very little effort to get reaction out of the person that you're interacting with. This is a thing that I want y'all to start thinking about as you're tying people and as you're tying patterns, because all of the little inputs that you're creating as you're tying the pattern creates all of these types of reactions. They're just smaller because you're oftentimes not tying someone around their neck. And because you're moving quickly, you don't often watch them, right? But this interaction is sort of at the heart of what I believe is what we are doing when we're engaging in rope bondage. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions?
And one thing, obviously, that he kind of touched on but didn't dwell on here is that he's watching, he does a thing and then he waits and sees what I do and then does something else. So this whole day and your homework is gonna be do a thing and observe, right? This is your permission to slow down and watch and wait and see what happens so that we're not rushing through stuff. Like, the important thing is the feedback that you're getting. You have a question?
It's more saying something.
Sure.
It reminds me of an exercise from Marcus and Abby.
Yep.
And then you're familiar that they pose it as a conversation.
Correct.
So when you're saying that, pausing and waiting.
Yes, you're waiting for their answer. You're asking a question with your rope, and then you're waiting for the response from the person in the rope before you ask another question. Otherwise, it becomes a barrage, an interrogation, rather than a conversation.
And I think the important thing is the way that Marcus actually describes it is an interview,
Yeah,
because
yes.
it's directional. It's not a conversation in the sense that the person who's at the other end of the rope I'm tying has the opportunity to ask questions. No, this is unidirectional. I ask questions, they answer. The answer that they give me helps me choose my next question.
So this version is something we learned from an artist named Murasaki, who's based in Tokyo. But that person learned from the same person that Marcus learned from, Yukimura Haruki. So it's important to give credit to the people that we learned from.
Yeah. So, another question?
Can you repeat that name?
Yes, so the person we learned it from was Murasaki. She's a prodom in Tokyo. She and Marcus both learned from an artist who has since passed on named Yukimura Haruki. And we can share that name on the Slack and the Discord.
Yeah.
Because the spelling are kind of tricky, and without seeing my face, that can be even harder.
So let's take 5 minutes for you to experiment with this first exercise, and then we'll do a quick round of feedback afterwards.
Also sirens.
Sirens pass by. Something's on fire in downtown.
Surprise.
So, for the next exercise we're going to do, it's going to require an odd bit of rope handling for the folks who are functioning as the person who retired. So, we want to start off with a little bit of a warm-up to get you used to the type of handling that you're going to be doing. In order to do that, we're going to do a simple exercise, getting you used to just switching rope from hand to hand, while keeping that tension that we just used in the exercise with the rope around the neck. So to do that, we're going to kneel so that everyone can see us. Yeah, we're going to put a single column tie around the person we're tying's waist. We're going to move far away from them.
Oh, do you actually need to shoot out so you can get close to me?
No, I'm good. There are increasing levels of difficulty with this exercise. The easiest level of difficulty is get used to transitioning the rope from one hand to the other while keeping the tension on the body, right? And you can do that a lot of different ways. Some people use the back of their hand. Some people use, I tend to trap it in my thumb. Some people will pluck with a finger. But people use different methods on how to transition this.
And you don't move.
Yeah.
Great.
So, right, all I'm doing is transitioning the rope from one hand to another and getting used to that feel. As I feel more comfortable with it, I'm going to start getting closer.
So the reason that this is harder is because suddenly you have a lot more rope to handle at the end. And one thing he's trying to manage is keeping control of the rope ends or the buttons where there are knots. Because as you get closer to a person, and even as you all are working in this enclosed space, you can, if you are not mindful of them, hit people with those buttons. And that's unpleasant. So we want to be mindful of both the side that's facing the person you're tying, as well as the side that is going away from you.
You'll notice that I keep both hands on the rope, right? I'm controlling both ends at any time. So it's not just about the hand that's about to do something. It's about the hand that's not being used at the moment, right?
No, they're both in use, right? It's just one is closer. And you also notice he's rotating
As
his
I get
body.
closer, I have to rotate and open my arms out and
Yeah.
turn my hips more.
And
right?
so we want to encourage you to rotate your torso and also extend your arm fully, because that's going to give you the widest wingspan possible. Fun fact about the human body, the majority of us are proportional, both across and tall. So your arm span for the majority of people is the same amount of height that you have. So I'm 5'5". I have 5.5 feet in my arms, like across my body through my arms. That gives you a lot of control over this rope, right? If you stretch out. I see a lot of people do this, and they do wind up doing a lot of little pulls. That's not efficient. And the person you're tying is gonna feel that.
Like
So
every
we're
little
gonna
pull, if
encourage
I'm
you-
pulling this a little bit, every time I'm pulling on the rope. If I pull one long pull, that is one long pull that Melissa feels, right?
It's gonna increase your efficiency, it's gonna increase the connection to the person. A lot of little pulls feels kind of frantic. One big pull is gonna feel really smooth, like you're in control, you're confident, you know what you're doing.
And I'm not
This
saying
is a
that
very-
sometimes you don't want these little frantic pulls,
But that's a choice.
but I want you to be able to choose it, not have to do it.
Right? So we're encouraging you to turn your body, extend out, get used to handling that rope in a way that feels fluid, and that you can get closer and closer to the person and still control the rope in the same way that you do when you only have a little bit to manage, once you have a lot to manage.
And the third level of this, the hardest part of this, I can't really do it because I can't stand because we're on camera, is being able to do all of this without the rope buttons touching the floor. Being able to handle and train and change over and control your buttons and get closer, even though this rope is very long, and control my buttons enough to where they don't hit the floor.
Yeah. So in the
Right.
same way that you can pull across and out, you can also pull across and up and keep those buttons off of the floor, right? So using those levels that you have to manage your rope, because one thing, some people enjoy the sound of the rope hitting the ground. It can be very soothing and very sort of meditative because it can be in a rhythm. But sometimes people get overstimulated by too much noise. So it's good to have, again, that option of control.
So, I would say, let's take the next 5 or so minutes, tie a single column tie around the person's waist at your time, and get used to just manipulating the rope from one hand to the other.
Yeah, so start fairly far away from the person, so you have enough room to do that. Spread out if you need more space for the people around you. We
Yeah.
do have
All right, friends. So now that we have warmed up our hands a little bit, now that we've thought about how to manage our rope and our rope ends, let's talk about what the next experiment/exercise is going to be. I first learned this in the same Wicked Dave class where Wicked Dave described learning how to tie by learning patterns. And the class at the time was titled Ichinawa, loosely translated single rope, first rope, or best rope, depending on who you ask. And the idea is that this is an experiment that has some rules in order to engage with the person that you're tying. So, rule number 1, you must tie a single column tie.
Somewhere.
Somewhere,
On the
it
body.
can be on any part of the body.
Somewhere on the body, there needs to be a single column tie.
Rule number 2,
Do not tie a pattern.
nope. Rule number 3, no knots, no frictions. You are simply wrapping the body.
You can change direction by looping around the rope, but don't change direction by adding a friction,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. We're gonna demonstrate, but this is the rule.
Any questions about any of those rules? The thing that you are creating with this person is a couple different things. You're creating a mini scene with this person because you are tying them, you're observing them, you see how they react, you're letting that reaction guide the next place that you tie, right? First thing. Second thing, you're building up a contextual database of how they interact with rope. Third thing, you're exercising the skills that you use as a person tying. Third thing, you're exercising the skills that you use as a person who is tying to sort of elicit those reactions from the person that you're tying. So think about things like how quickly or slowly you tie, how tight or loose that you tie, where on the body you're putting rope, where on the body you're not putting rope, how you're positioning your body, how you're positioning the person that you're tying's body.
It's a lot to keep in mind all at once, so definitely don't think, you don't have to try to focus on all of that right now.
Yep.
Right? But these are all things that come into play as you're moving around, as you're tying the person, as the person you're tying is moving around. Like, you're gonna notice a lot of things, but as I mentioned before, slow down.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in a rush. We're only giving you 5 minutes now, but we're gonna do this same exercise with different focuses throughout the rest of the course, or throughout the rest of today, and then your homework is gonna be these, right? And you can take as long or as short for these as you want during your homework time.
And these are great little mini scenes to do with somebody that you just met or who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of context on rope and what it could be about, to sort of inform yourself about who they are and how they interact with rope, and to inform them about what to expect from you as somebody who's tying, right? So I'm going to do a demonstration with Melissa. We're going to take a few minutes. I'm going to maybe come at this from a way that Melissa doesn't anticipate, because we've done this a billion times. So for me, this becomes, in some ways, an attempt to play into the expectations Melissa has, and also an attempt to subvert the expectations Melissa has, right? You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So, single column, somewhere. If you're like, you know what, I'm still kind of fumbly doing 2 wraps, feel free to just do 1. It's fine. You're not suspending, and as long as that knot doesn't fall apart, you don't need to. Woo! So in case y'all can't see, he's wrapped around my torso and my knee, and now he's caught my other thigh.
A little bit of waist rope will make Melissa make a sound that I like, which is grunting and sad. am continuing to move the rope. Regardless of what I'm moving. Ooh, I did get that nice and tight.
Mhm.
So,
So one thing that he touched on earlier, but that I feel like he really emphasized there was untying and making sure that there was tension on the rope until it was fully removed from my body. That's the last thing that that person in the rope is going to experience. If you do it thoughtlessly or without intention, the person in the rope is going to feel that. So he has a lot of intention with removing the rope, as much so as when he first applied it. All of it is tying. It's just tying forward and then tying in reverse to remove it. So put as much intention throughout. Otherwise, like, that person may feel as though you don't care at the end, and that's the last thing they're gonna remember. So maybe spend some time there.
some ideas that I played with and that I was thinking about when I did that thing. Normally, when Melissa and I do this exercise, I position myself here.
Which
And there's
is,
a lot of physical contact.
which is kind of nice because I can feel him there. I know that we're close, right? Physical proximity, but also like there's some care that
Yeah.
I feel through this body position.
In this instance, I made the choice to position myself not touching Melissa,
This is a
giving it
little,
a different experience.
yeah, this is a little more removed physically, but also like I feel more observed from here. Yeah.
And then I made the decision to physically move Melissa into a space in a way that I probably normally wouldn't, and it was surprising, as you heard by her go, woo! Right? So I took the things that I knew about how Melissa and I normally interact. I knew that you would all be watching us do this thing. I needed to be able to create some sort of reaction in order for you to understand how this process works. So I took Melissa's expectations, sort of subverted them with some things that would surprise her, and used that in ways for you to see how that interaction might work. Does that all make sense?
Also, he did things that he knew would be big enough for y'all as well as folks at home to see, right? If you're just doing this amongst yourselves for homework, whatever, they can be a lot smaller.
Mhm.
Because you're close, you can really get in there and see and like note all the little nuances. We did big stuff for your benefit.
Yeah. And this is typically a little bit shorter than I would normally do,
Yes.
a whole bunch of others.
Yes,
right?
we're gonna give you again like 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
like I said, homework, you can do this, you know, as long or as short as you want. And people, some of the folks that we have done this exercise with, who are, you know, instructors from elsewhere, have said that they've done basically this for like a 2-hour scene. So you can draw it out as much as you want. One thing that I will note, and that you probably saw while he was tying, he got to the end of the rope and then just backed out and did something else, right? So you don't get to the end and then are like, okay, I'm done. That's not, you're not finished there. Back out, try something else, go a different direction.
Mhm.
Cool.
Any questions about how the exercise should work? Awesome. So we're going to take 5-ish minutes to do this exercise, and then we're going to do another round of feedback. So, Welcome back. We are now going to up the challenge of the exercise that you just did. So what you're going to do is repeat the same exercise with the same rules. So you'll have somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes. You're going to tie a single column tie. You're going to keep the rope moving. You're not going to tie a pattern. You're not going to use any frictions or knots. But for this iteration of the exercise, you are going to have a goal. One of the best ways to tell if what you are doing is creating a reaction in someone is if you can hear it. So for the next exercise, I want the people who are tying to be collectors of sounds. It is your goal in the next 5 to 7 minutes to make the person that you are tying make as many and as varied sounds as you can in that amount of time. For the people being tied, I would encourage you to be as authentic as possible. What that means is, don't be an obstinate jerk who sits there with your mouth screwed shut and refuses to make a sound whatsoever. But also, don't give it up too easy.
Don't be a ham. You're not performing, right?
Make them earn it. Make them earn it. Be authentic to who you are. Don't just be like, like, calm it down. Be you. You know what the bounds of you are. So don't be a brat, but don't be a ham, right? Does anyone have any questions about what the goals of the next 5 to 7 minutes are? We're going to do 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to do feedback again. Any questions before we start?
And you don't have to keep count of the sounds, but if you do, awesome. Yeah, question.
Can you maneuver their body without rope? Like if I wanted to position them in a certain way, like
I would encourage you to try to do it with the rope.
with the rope? Okay.
If you can't without the rope, do that. Also, no punching or slapping or hitting. Like, the rope makes the noise, not you.
Yeah, the rope elicits the noise, right? The rope elicits the noise. The rope is your tool. The rope is an extension of you. This is you figuring out how to use it as an extension of
Every time we do this, somebody tries to game something differently. You know the spirit of what we're asking. Play within the rules.
you. Yeah.
Don't yell at someone, make a sound! Other question?
You answered it.
Perfect. No hitting, right?
Well, make a sound.
No clawing, no other implements. Everything stays in your bag. Don't bring anything else out.
I like sadistic masseuse.
No,
Do
no.
not use your body unless it is to move the rope to move their body.
No
and
pressure
get a
point
sound.
play. No.
We love those things. Don't get me wrong. We love those things outside of this exercise.
So,
For this exercise, use the rope to elicit a sound or multiple
also, remember, this is a complete thing. You have to untie with the same care that you tie. All of the other goals that you had in the first exercise are still applicable here. You have an added goal on top of that. So with that said, you have 7 minutes, and your 7 minutes starts now.
Part of what we're doing, the idea for that is like, yes, we want to collect sounds, but not arbitrarily, right? Like, we're starting to create sort of a database of what does this person do with this particular input? What is an output that they might have? And start to tell, like, is this a positive thing? Is that a negative thing? If it seems negative, is that what you want, right? Like, just because we want to have people tie with us again, doesn't mean that we can't push into things that might be hard for them, right? That's okay, as long as it's something that you are intentionally doing, and that you have agreed is gonna be okay, and you have a plan to take care of them afterward. Pushing into those hard parts, pushing into stuff that you know is challenging for them, those can be okay too. But exploring different parts of their body that haven't been tied before, or that you haven't tied in this particular way, like maybe with more force or more speed or less speed, like dragging the rope, you know, like there's a lot of different ways you can interact with different body parts and different body positions. And so what we're doing is starting to collect all of that input, right? All of that feedback that the person is giving. And so that's why I said, like, slow down, really observe, because the more you can pick up and sort of store about how does this person react to this input, gives you more information for once you move away from this kind of free form activity and into patterns, you can start to know, oh, that reaction ties to this kind of input. Okay, that's a positive thing for them. Great, I can move in that direction. Or, oh, I don't want them to be having a positive reaction right now. I can push into something I know is going to be harder for them and challenging.
So, for the last exercise we're gonna do for today, it's gonna be another 7 minutes. But the thing that we want the people who are timed to do is bring an agenda to the table. We want you to have an intentionality. And I'm gonna walk around and give you each a single word intention for the 7 minutes that you have. And it is your goal in the 7 minutes that you have to use the things that you've built up and learned through the previous exercises about the person you're tying with as a way to communicate those things.
And when he
So-
says an intention, it's going to be a single word that is an emotion. That emotion is something you are trying to embody and communicate to the person being tied. It is not the emotion that you are intending for them to feel. You cannot control how a person feels. You can control your intention, right? So in previous versions, we were not very clear, and folks thought that they were trying to elicit this emotion from the person in the rope. And that's a fool's errand because no one can control someone else's emotion.
It is contextually very hard to elicit any emotion from anyone in any sort of exact way. So with that said,
But you can focus on what you are intending to communicate and see if you can communicate that through the rope, through moving your body, through moving their body, and see. And when we do our feedback round, we're going to ask the person who was tied, do you know what they were trying to say to you?
so don't tell them the word.
Correct. This one is extra hard. If
So
you
don't-
if you do not feel like you got it, that's okay. We would like to hear what you think if you're comfortable sharing. And it's fun. It can be fun to compare, right? So the person tying, the person being tied says, "I think this is what I got from it," and then the person who tied can say like what the word was and how close it was. Again, if you are not comfortable sharing at that point, totally fine. It can be a fun exercise, but if you're not comfortable, that's totally okay.
So because we all have masks on, I can't just walk up to you and whisper to you. So anyone who is tied, meet me in my office. For secrets. Part of why I picked some of the things that I picked for the people who were tying things is, in some instances, I wanted to give you something that was contextually difficult to express, like to challenge you. In some instances, I wanted to try to play maybe against the thing that I sort of see being your default approach or intention to the way that you tie. So I wanted to challenge you in that instance. But more than anything, I wanted you to start thinking about what is the intention that you bring to the table whenever you tie someone, regardless of how you tie them, and what are the ways that you can use the rope and the way that you interact with the rope to communicate that intention to the person that you're tying as you're doing, right? So, part of your homework for practice over the course of the next month is for the person that you are tying to write down a dozen, 15, if you want to be a real challenging 20 different words
Different emotion words.
that are things that you are excited to experience. Melissa's going to share an emotions wheel as a suggestion.
Yeah.
I would tell you,
It's available from your website.
unless you are really interested in pushing into challenging things, there is a lighter, easier to deal with half of that wheel,
The lower half,
and there is a more complicated, challenging half of that wheel.
these can be scary and hard. They include things like sad and mad and scared. Unless you're excited about experiencing and playing with those in this top half, I would avoid putting those on your cards. Right? Stick to the bottom half, these yellow, green, purple, blue ones. Those can be happy fun times. These
And-
other ones can be make people anxious and sad.
And this is the reason that I want the people who are receiving the rope to define these things, because I want you to start to build up a lexicon of, oh, these are the experiences I'm excited about in rope so I can express them to other people, right? So
Also, one nice thing about this exercise, as the person in the rope who then will need to guess what the emotion was that was trying to be communicated, you have a preset number of things it can be.
Yeah.
Because you have written them down.
Yeah.
Unlike this exercise we just did where who the fuck knows what he told you.
I come up with weird words, weird and very specific words.
If you as the person being tied knows what the options are because you wrote them down, you know you have a limited number of things to choose from. So it will make it a little easier for the two of you to get on the same page.
So write those down, and then for the person in the rope, take 5 minutes, pick a word, try to express that intention by using this exercise, see if you can connect on that word, pick a different word, go through a 5-minute exercise and try to see if you can identify with those words. For the people who are writing the words, like, don't be too crazy. Like, we had a person in the rope that, I kid you not, wrote 7 brides for 7 brothers. The musical. As a rope bondage prompt. 7 brides for 7 brothers.
And that person's top was able to tie that thing, and the person was able to guess it. They had a very close connection. They knew each other well enough to be able to communicate that. If you don't know the person very well, maybe choose some
Like,
bigger.
start off with Oklahoma or the Music Man, and then maybe move into 7 brides for 7
I mean,
brothers.
cats. Could we go cats?
Yeah, you could go cats. You could do, like, start off pretty broad and then narrow it down. In addition to that homework, as of noon today, on the YouTube channel, there will be 2 new videos posted. Those videos are for the first wrap of a hands behind tie. So they're instructionals on forward tension and what's called an X friction, and reverse tension and what's called an L friction. Work on those things. Quick note, hand positioning. I know it's often difficult for folks to have their hands behind their back. If you want to practice by having hands in front, that is completely acceptable. During next month's class, we'll sort of talk about why this particular pattern, what's important about it, what about hand positioning is important, sort of all of those things. But contextually for the next month, as you're practicing these things, hands in front is fine, right? Just make sure that you understand the operation of how to do each of the things, so that when we come in class and we practice, we can give you feedback and you can sort of have enough context to understand all of those things.
So to recap, your homework, watch and practice those videos. Write down 10 to 12 to 15 emotions and shuffle through them, pick one, tie that thing. See if you can guess. Also, you might practice doing these for different amounts of time, right? We did 5 and 7 minutes here in class. You can take longer, you can take less time. Like, see if you can communicate that emotion or that intention in less time. What about in more time? Like, do you need more time?
Well, for a lot of folks, like, oh, I have this intention in my mind, I work very fast, and I engage in things, and you get to the end and you're like, oh, I've got another 2 minutes, what do I do for the next 2 minutes, right? So, figure out like, okay, can I elongate and can I sustain this for 10 minutes? Can I elongate this and can I sustain it for 15 minutes? Can I work slower and more deliberately in a way that builds on top of itself until I create sort of that completency? So these are all things for you to experiment with, and these are things to bring to and inform the patterns that you tie, because going forward, things are going to be sort of really, really pattern heavy. And we want this to exist as a bedrock for you to understand it. Like, hey, even though we spend a whole lot more time having you understand that stuff, this is the essential part of what you're doing. If there was a singular thing that you walked away with understanding out of this entire 20 months, it is this class, right? So please, please, please take that to heart and take it seriously.
And if you find as you're trying to do the emotions exercise that you're still kind of fumbly with your single column or moving the rope, go back to practicing that single column. Go back to that handling exercise that we did at the beginning so that you can feel more fluid with your handling and getting the rope around your partner. Like, all of these exercises are things that we hope you will revisit if you feel like, I'm not quite getting it, my tension's weird, whatever. Like, it's not meant to be a thing you do a single time in class with us and then never come back to. Like, those are things you're meant to go back to. If you're like, I'm trying this video and I'm just like frustrated, go back to the hand-to-hand exercise as like a way to sort of a palate cleanser, sort of a thing that like singular focus, just one thing, and then, you know, give yourself a break, go back to the video. Like, break it up, give yourself some refreshers in between. We're not here to prescribe how you practice, we just want you to practice. So if you're noticing things that you're struggling with, try to pick up different parts and put other stuff down for a minute. Always contact us on Slack or Discord if you're having questions or problems. Also tomorrow, Andrew will be doing the Discord streaming for any questions. So, you know, jump on the
Or if
chat
you just
with
want to
him.
pop in and hang out with me so I'm not lonely in Discord by myself.
Yeah. Are there any questions before we wrap up for today? Because we still have a few minutes.
Anything at all?
No questions.
No questions?
Question.
Is it are they trying to communicate the emotion, is the tire trying to communicate the emotion that they are feeling?
Yes.
Or elicit the emotion that they want you as the tyee to feel?
So the question is, in the exercise, is the person who is tying trying to cause that emotion in the person being tied, or are they trying to express that emotion towards the person that's being tied? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so like, what if I, as the tyee, want to feel scared? Would I write down the word scared, or?
I would write down the word scary.
Scary.
So they should be scary, you should be scared,
Oh, okay.
right?
But again, and I thought I touched on this, but maybe it needed to be worded differently. It is very hard for any one person to elicit a specific emotion from anyone else.
Right.
Actions that someone else takes are going to resonate with me however they resonate with me. His actions don't dictate how I feel. I might feel a certain way that he could anticipate, but generally we don't know. Like, there's a lot of internal dialogue happening with each of us that I can't communicate and that folks will never know, right? So the idea that they could do something that will definitely elicit a very specific reaction is highly unlikely.
It's a
So-
contextual thing that comes up often in rope, and probably most frequently around like the ideas of like humiliation, right? There's a thing that Melissa and I understand about each other. It's like humiliation and embarrassment are things that are hard to accomplish with us, and B, are kind of so core to who we are that experiencing that isn't a pleasant situation. But there are things that I could do to Melissa that 80% of people would be humiliated by, but Melissa will not, because it is so contextual.
And
So-
I might just laugh.
Yeah,
Like, this is goofy and you're being weird. And now I'm laughing and this is fun and goofy. But for someone else, they might experience that as like mortification, right? So like, how someone reacts to something is very hard to know. So that is not the challenge, because that is too abstract. What we are hoping that y'all can do is take that word, and the person tying is the one feeling it and trying to express it to the other person. If your hope, as the person writing the word, is, I would like to feel this thing, sort of to Andrew's point, take it and say, okay, what emotion would they need to communicate to me for me to have that particular reaction that I'm hoping for? It takes it to another level of abstraction, which is really hard, right?
people are complicated internal things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? All right, friends. Well, thank you for your time and attention. Thank you. I want to recognize really quickly, like, the thing that you all did in this space today is pretty fucking vulnerable, around a bunch of people that, like, you sort of barely-ish know. So to engage in those things as bravely as you have over the time that we've had is really pretty incredible. So you should give yourselves a pat on the back for that thing, and not forget that that space is a difficult one to go into. As you leave this space, make sure that you're taking care of each other for having gone through that with those vulnerable moments together, and make sure that you're both in a space where you feel enthusiastic and comforted and encouraged by the fact that you're willing to push into those spaces together, right?
And one additional note I realized we didn't touch on last class when we were sort of setting expectations, but the things that we do together are intended to sort of stay together in this room. If you see folks from class outside on the street, feel free to say hello, but don't then talk about like, oh, that scene you had in class was really awesome.
I can't believe you made that person bark like a dog. That was amazing.
Well, you don't know
I didn't know you could use rope bondage to make somebody bark like a dog.
Like, you don't know sort of what level of comfort folks have with the outside world around this thing. They might be with their mom, like, they might have their kids with them, like, just, hey, how you doing? Okay, going on your way, right? Like, let's keep what happens in here together with us, and, you know, be cordial.
They're friends of a friend that I met at a cookie exchange over the holidays.
Right. Like, we go to a dinner club together, like, whatever. Like, we don't need to share how you know each other or, you know, what we've done here together outside of this.
We go to the same Starbucks at the same time every single morning. It's really weird.
Once a month on Sundays.
Yeah. So, just, you know, respecting each other's privacy and sort of anonymity outside of this room to keep that vulnerability sort of held in high esteem.
Yeah. With all of that said, please fold up your puzzle mats and return them to where you found them.